This is an article from the Reformed Presbyterian, April 1838, entitled Palestine. The following extracts are taken from sketches of the lectures of the Honorable Mr. Buckingham of England, lately delivered to crowded audiences in New York and published in The Evangelist. They are worthy the careful attention of everyone who desires to become acquainted with the geographical features of the land of Palestine. They may also be rendered abundantly useful in explaining the frequent allusions made in the sacred scriptures to the situation and characteristic traits of various parts of the Holy Land. The addition to all the delightful, tender, and solemn associations which invest the soil of Palestine with so many hallowed recollections, there is, in its own relative position, exuberant soil, diversified scenery, and wonderful phenomena, enough to render a description truly worthy of special regard and attention. Notwithstanding the attempts which infidel writers have made to cast a contemptuous shade over it, there is no land upon the surface of the globe more worthy to have been selected by the Deity as the inheritance of his chosen people than this, and, regarded as to its geographical position alone, it may truly be called a gem set in the center of the earth. On the west is the great Mediterranean Sea, adapted to pour wealth in its lap. From Gibraltar, which in ancient days was thought to be the boundary of the world on the one side, to the Black Sea on the other, were situated all the arts and sciences and civilization and wealth of the Old World. The islands of the Greek archipelago, thence onward to the continent of Greece, with Athens and Sparta, and the Adriatic, at the head of which stood Venice, and still onward Italy, with Rome as mistress of the world, Gaul, Iberia, and Portugal. Then, turning to the southern boundary below the Mediterranean, we find Egypt with the Nile running between its rich and fruitful banks, the land of Morocco, and the ancient, rich, and populous country of Mauritania, now Barbary, together with Abyssinia, the land of the Queen of Sheba, all contributing to its resources, while on the east lies the extensive region of Mesopotamia, situated between the Tigris and the Euphrates, with the empires of Chaldea, Assyria, and Babylonia comprised within its limits, and still onward toward the east Media, Persia, India, and China, all holding out vast commercial advantages to the dwellers in the promised land. On the north, the vast empire of Syria, the rich territory of Asia Minor, Byzantium, and the regions of Scythia. Not only was Palestine thus theoretically situated the most favorable of all lands to become rich and powerful, but she became so in reality. And in the days of Solomon, when the kingdom was at its zenith, the wealth and resources of this now desolate land were beyond the limits of modern conception. Before the discovery of the mariner's compass or the adaptation of astronomical science to the purposes of navigation, the vessels which conducted the commerce of the ancient world were obliged to creep along the shore by day and cast their anchor at night, seldom going out of sight of land, and consequently performing their voyage only by patient and preserving labor. But we read of the fleets sent from Palestine visiting the distant port of Ezion-Geber, and moreover, they were oftentimes 3 entire years in making a single voyage. But still so multiplied were their numbers and so rich were their cargoes, that from these sources the land became literally surfeited with wealth. And the articles of traffic which they brought home, such as gold, silver, copper, ivory, apes, peacocks, etc., etc., prove them to have been brought from India, from China, or the islands of Java and Sumatra, where these commodities are found. The Temple of Solomon contained more wealth than any other edifice the world ever saw, and the cost of this building alone, together with its appurtenances, was several hundred millions of pounds sterling. And as Palestine produced neither gold nor silver nor precious stones, all these which were used in great profusion in its adorning must have been the product of some other climate, and exchanged in traffic for the agricultural products of this fertile country, which were reaped in abundance. Leaving then its geographical advantages, let us proceed to examine the singular beauty and contrast of its borders. On the western frontier, the Mediterranean Sea, as it stretches itself along for a distance of 150 miles, presents all the variety of maritime scenery which can be imagined upon its shore. First come the plains of the Philistines, a low tract, with the cities of Gath, Gaza, Ekron, Askelon, and Ashdod, and possessing a soil adapted to pasturage and the cultivation of corn. From Joppa to Ptolemais, the country is more diversified and the land undulating, presenting alternate challenges of hill and valley. alternate changes, of hill and valley. Thence onward to the region of Tyre and Sidon, the scenery is bold and romantic in the extreme. To this view, the eastern frontier presents a striking contrast. The peaceful valley of the Jordan, with its rural and quiet landscape, uniform, still pleasing, and calling to mind the poetic descriptions of Arcadian scenery, with the shepherds' tents pitched upon the waving plains and the peaceful flocks quietly grazing around. On the north is the ridge of Lebanon, extending diagonally across the country, constituting the mountain barrier, while on the south the contrast is perfected and the variety secured by the view of the long, low desert of Edom, appearing still more desolate from the contiguity of the surrounding verdure. Within the borders of Palestine, the usual variety of mountain and vale and plain present themselves in sufficient diversity to add both to the beauty of the prospect and give variety to the scene. The three grand or principal divisions are Galilee, Samaria, and Judea. Galilee, lying upon the north, is a country of plains, and has always been devoted to the grazing of cattle and cultivation of corn. Samaria is the central region of Palestine, and is hilly and devoted to the culture of the olive and the vine, the valleys yielding the former, while the sides of the hills are covered with the clustering vines. In Judea, which occupies the southern portion of the land, the surface of the country is rough and broken. The olive and vine are cultivated to some extent, and the whole region abounds in honey made by the wild bee and deposited in the clefts of the rocks. Thus we see that the description of this land given by Moses to the Israelites while they were in the wilderness, which divided it from Egypt, was not in any degree metaphorical, as has often been supposed, but literally true. For while on one hand Galilee from its abundant pastures supplied the land bountifully with milk, Judea yielded a profusion of honey, more abundant than the people could exhaust, and corn and wine and oil were produced in supplies that might truly entitle them to special remark by the sacred historian. Here, too, the clouds drop fatness, the gentle rains descend upon the earth to fertilize and enrich it. First in importance among the individual features of this country, Mount Lebanon deserves our attention. Arising to the altitude of 10,000 feet above the level of the sea, its towering summit is covered with eternal snow. Cascades and waterfalls are sparkling on every side, and delightful odors are sent forth in delicious profusion, while dark and terrible ravines cause the idea of terrific grandeur to be mingled with the softness and beauty of many of its features. In point of magnificence, this mountain may be compared with the Himalaya, while its picturesque scenery is unsurpassed even by the romantic regions of Switzerland. This mountain was the delight of King Solomon, and has been treated of by him in the Canticles, under every variety of endearing epithet. He studied the various plants and trees and shrubs with which it was covered in almost infinite variety, from the stately cedar to the hyssop that grows on the wall. At the foot of the mountain, the climate and productions compare with those of countries near the tropics, the thermometer averaging 100 degrees in the month of July. As you ascend the first 1,000 feet, you arrive at the climate of Greece and Italy and the south of France. The next 1,000 feet brings us to the climate and productions of Belgium, Holland, and the north of France. Another ascent of equal distance, and we arrive at the temperature of England, while we may still arrive at another stride within the bleak and dreary regions of Nova Zembla. This presenting every variety of climate and production within the compass of a single mountain.